storyteller. If you're planning to pursue traditional publishing, whether that's a book contract or a spot for your short story in a magazine or anthology, the story isn't the only thing you need to write well. Every publishing house, literary agent, or magazine or anthology editor has a set of specific requirements called submission guidelines that you must fulfill if you want them to consider your story for publication. They may ask for a chapter outline, a 1 or 2 page synopsis, the first 50 pages or 3 chapters of your story, or if you're writing something shorter like a short story or a children's book, they may ask for the entire manuscript up front. But the one thing they all require is a query letter. If this letter fails to impress, the agent or editor may not even read your story, so learning to write one well is crucial. Welcome to this week's writer coaching session, where we'll discuss how to craft a quality query letter. I'm Bridget from B Squared Writer Coaching. I'm an author, editor, and your story coach, here to help you make your story powerful, polished, and publishable. Before we dissect the query letter in all its parts, I have a gift for you just for visiting my channel. My free workshop, The 6 Essential Elements of a Powerful Story. Before you can craft that attention-grabbing query letter, you need a powerful story to promote. This 25-minute video workshop walks you through everything your story needs in order to impact readers and publishers. It's packed with tips on how to power up your story's characters, plot, conflicts, plus how to write all this in a way that makes readers feel like they're living the story. Just click the link in the description or visit b2writercoaching.com/workshop. That's the letter B, the number 2, writercoaching.com/workshop to access the workshop today. And be sure to stick around to the end of the video so you won't miss this week's Power Up, a super practical action step you can take right now in the story you're writing. So what is a query letter anyway? It's a 1-page sales pitch for your book, addressed to a literary agent or the acquisitions editor at a publishing house, magazine, or for an anthology. Think of it like a movie trailer for your book, because it's designed to make the agent or editor long for more, just like the potential audience of a movie. When should you write a query letter? Once the story is finished, if you're writing fiction or memoir. If you're writing book-length nonfiction that isn't memoir, like a how-to book or self-help or something like that, you can do this sooner because for nonfiction, publishers often will accept what they call book proposals, which is basically just the query letter, kind of a summary of what the book's about, and a table of contents style outline of what the book will include, along with the author's expertise, and so on. But you can Google nonfiction book proposals for more information on that. We focus here on this channel on storytelling, which usually involves fiction, memoir, and stories that we use within our nonfiction to make a point. In that case, the story comes first, then the query letter. Wait until you're ready to publish, because that way you'll know how the story ends and all the details, and that can help you craft a better query letter. Who is a query letter written for? Well, we mentioned this briefly above, but it's for literary agents, like if you're writing fiction or even memoir, and you want to pitch your book to a literary agent who will represent you and help you shop your book to publishing companies. These people will also help you to negotiate contracts and try to make the terms as favorable for you as possible. If you're pitching directly to the publisher, however, you'll still need a query letter. So if you're submitting to a publishing house, or as we said earlier, if you're submitting a short story to a magazine or an anthology, you still will need to write a query letter. It's basically to let the editor know what your story is about and whether it's a good fit for their publication. You'll want to make sure that you've formatted your query letter correctly. So basically it is, like we said earlier, a 1-page letter, so you wouldn't want it to go over that, single-spaced, usually in Times New Roman 12-point font, and it's written in block letter style like a business letter. What this means is the paragraphs are not indented, everything is flush to the left margin, and you will have a blank line between each paragraph, and as I said, single-spaced line spacing. You can Google block style letters or How to Write a Business Letter for more formatting tips on this. Even though most editors and agents prefer to receive query letters by email these days, you'll still want to use a word processing document to write your letter before you paste it into the body of your email, so you can make sure you're sticking to that 1-page length, because believe it or not, editors and agents can tell if you go longer. They receive so many query letters every day that they're not going to waste their time reading it if it doesn't follow these formatting guidelines. Now that we know what a query letter is, what goes in it? One helpful way to approach writing a query letter is to divide it into 5 basic sections, each designed to help you grab the interest of the agent or editor and help them envision how they can sell your story. These parts can be rearranged or restructured depending on the needs of your story and on whether you have a connection with the person you're writing to or not. The first part of a query letter is the hook. Agents and acquisitions editors read hundreds of queries, so it's very important to grab their attention from the very first sentence. But keep in mind, it should read like the opening of a letter. You are writing to a person after all. And you'll want to tailor the hook to that particular agent or editor. There are 2 basic options for how to structure your hook. The first one is to use your connections. If you've met this editor or agent at a writer's conference or attended a workshop they've conducted, you can use that in-person connection and remind them of this in the hook. This is especially helpful if you pitched your book to the person or mentioned your book to them and they asked to read the manuscript or a part of the manuscript. Be sure to remind the editor or agent that he or she requested this and let them know that you're attaching it with your query letter. Maybe you haven't met this agent or editor before, but you've read posts on their blog or website, or as I mentioned earlier, maybe you watched a workshop or like an online video that they've created and found it helpful in your writing. You can use the hook to mention that particular post that you read or video you've watched of theirs, and also mention how it helped you in your writing. Another indirect connection with the agent or editor is if you've enjoyed reading a book that they represented, if it's an agent represented, or if it's an acquisitions editor, a book or story that they published. You can mention the title of the story and what you enjoyed about it, especially if your story is in any way similar to that one, then this can be a great opening for your query. And finally, another indirect connection could be that if one of their clients or a person that they have published has referred you to this person and recommended that you submit your story to them. But what can you do if you don't have a connection with the agent or editor? Use a story to sell your story. You can use what we call an elevator pitch, which is a sentence or 2 about your story that you would craft if you were wanting to tell someone what your story is about in, let's say, 1 sentence or 2. They call this an elevator pitch because often at writers' conferences, people will end up writing in an elevator with an agent or editor, and that person might say, "Hey, what are you writing? What are you working on?" And you need to be able to tell them during that elevator ride about your story. So you only have a sentence or 2 in order to do that. You could open your query letter with this elevator pitch. Or you may have crafted a tagline, which is sort of 1 or 2 or possibly 3 short sentences that go on the back of the book or at the top of the book description in bold that are kind of a teaser. They grab the reader's attention and make the reader want to know more about your story. Either of those can make a good hook. A hook is a great way to grab the agent or editor's inner reader right away and have them salivating for more of your story. It's an opportunity to display your author voice and a little bit of your personality as well, to let them know what your writing style is like. It can also give an insight into your personality, which is important. Agents and editors want to work with authors who not only tell great stories and follow guidelines, but are also personable and professional, as well as those who are a good fit compared with their own personalities. It's just like a job interview. You want to work for a boss who complements your personality type, and employers want the same thing. Section 2 of a query letter, starting with the second paragraph, is the teaser. Think of this like the description that you'll find on the back cover of a book or on the book sales page on retail sites. It's not a complete synopsis of the book and does not give away the ending. You want this to grab the reader's attention and make them want more. So it should end with something intriguing that leaves a question in the mind of the agent or editor when they're reading. Your story's teaser should answer the following questions. What makes your story unique? This can refer to an unusual aspect of the setting or a familiar story told in an unusual way, such as a fairy tale retelling, or something unique about the protagonist, etc. Major setting details like time period or a unique location are especially important to include if you're writing science fiction, fantasy, or historical fiction. A taste of the world building will pull the agent or editor into your story and give them a hint at the genre. Another question to ask yourself when deciding what to put in your teaser is, who are your major characters? Your protagonist, your antagonist, and if you have another viewpoint character or a really strong secondary character, romantic interest, someone like that. So you'll want to consider whose information you want to include in the teaser and stick to just those major characters. Perhaps the most important question to ask yourself when constructing a teaser is, what does your protagonist want? Why does she want it? And what's standing in her way of getting it? Alluding to this in your teaser will give the agent or editor a reason to care about your protagonist. And finally, ask yourself, what is at stake for your protagonist and or his or her world? This is super important to include in the teaser because it reveals a little bit of the conflict in the story and lets the editor or agent know a bit of a hint at the scope of the story. Here are a few guidelines for when you're writing your teaser. First, only name the major characters. So you may mention other people, but you wouldn't want to mention them by name. Just name your protagonist, possibly your antagonist, and as I mentioned earlier, maybe a strong secondary character or another viewpoint character, or if your story has multiple protagonists, you can name those people, a romantic interest or a significant sidekick to the protagonist who has a major role in the story. Limit the number of characters you name to around 3, maybe 4, not much more than that, because remember, your teaser is going to be short. It's probably around 200 or fewer words. Some may go up to 300 depending on the length of your story, but it's only a paragraph or two in the query letter, so you don't have a lot of room to name very many people here. Next, stick to only major plot points that affect your character's choices early on or lead to the major conflict of the story. And a couple things not to include in the teaser: why you wrote this story or what the major themes are, for instance. Focus on what happens in the story instead. You should not include minor events or things that happen later in the story. Also, do not include how the story ends, any major plot twists, or how important stakes are resolved in the story. Spoilers like this will not encourage the agent or editor to read the manuscript. Remember, we want to give them mystery. Are you finding this helpful? If so, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss future writer coaching sessions. Section 3 of a query letter is what some people call a tag or a marketing paragraph. The purpose of this paragraph is to help the agent or editor decide how they would sell your story or your book. If you're writing a novel or a book-length memoir, this paragraph will show the editor where your book belongs in a bookstore or how to position it on retail sites that are online. If you're pitching a short story, this paragraph will help the magazine or anthology editor know whether your story is a good fit for that particular issue or volume, and if not, give them an idea of where it might fit in the future edition. What's included in the tag or marketing paragraph? First of all, the title of your story and its genre. Also, whether this is a part of a series, whether that's a short story or the first novel in a book series. You'll also want to indicate the position of the story in that series. For example, book one of a trilogy or the second story in a 12-story sequence, something like that. You'll want to list the word count. This can be a deciding factor, especially if you write book-length stories like novels or memoir. An agent or editor will want to know if your book fits the general length guidelines for your genre. And a magazine or anthology editor will also want to know how long your short story is so that they can determine whether they have room for it or if it's compatible with the other stories that they've already chosen for the edition of the magazine or anthology. You'll also want to include who your target audience is. Is this a young adult story or written for children, adults, men, women? If you're writing for children, is it middle grade? Or is it a chapter book? Is it a picture book or read aloud? Let the agent or editor know who they're going to sell your story to. Since this is a marketing paragraph, you can also include titles that are similar to your book or story. This will further help the agent or editor decide how to categorize your story, where to place it, and also give them a better feel for what your story is like. Part 4 of the query letter is the author bio. This is different from the About the Author page in a book or an author bio on his or her website. In a query letter, the bio's purpose is to show the agent or editor why you were the best or most qualified person to write this story. It can include the following: a list of your published books, short stories, or articles, if they're relevant to the story you're pitching. Keep in mind that if you've published a recipe in Women's Home Journal, for example, that's a publication credit, but it might not have anything to do with your sci-fi story you're trying to pitch. It can also include writing-related awards or contests you've won and memberships you have in writers' organizations, especially national ones. If you have a huge social media following, YouTube channel subscription numbers, or you're maybe a well-known podcaster, or you have another type of platform like you're a public speaker or an expert in a certain field, especially if you're writing nonfiction or memoir, this can be important to include in your author bio as well to showcase your credibility and credentials for writing this book, if those things are relevant, that is. And finally, you can include any items from your background that relate to this book and informed your ability to write it. For example, where you live or have lived, if that place features prominently in the book. If this setting is crucial to the book, knowing that you lived there can let the agent or editor know you're writing from an informed standpoint. You can mention family or pets if someone similar plays a crucial role in the plot. For example, if you're writing a story about a Labrador retriever and that's your main character, let's say it's a children's story, and you raised Labrador retrievers, for instance, then you have some authority on the subject and can let the editor or agent know that you have a lot of knowledge in that area. Or if a character in your story is dealing with mental illness and you have a family member who endured the same condition, you could mention this. You can also mention schooling or an occupation if your protagonist attends a school similar to the one you did or is in a similar job or work environment to one you experienced. For example, a teenage author might mention that the book is set in a school similar to hers or the protagonist is the same age she is. A nurse may mention her profession if the main character in the book is also a medical professional. You'll want to mention briefly how any of these items may have impacted your story or how your knowledge in that area helped you write the book more effectively. As a bonus tip, you can include marketing ideas for your story in either the tag or marketing paragraph or the author bio paragraph, whichever those ideas would fit better with. A lot of times agents and editors really do want to know that an author has ideas for marketing their story because the publisher will only do so much marketing for you. The author is expected to do quite a bit even when you traditionally publish. And section 5, finally, the closing of the letter. Politeness goes a long way with agents and editors, so be sure to thank them for taking the time to consider your story or book. Also, mention anything you've attached with your query letter if you are attaching the manuscript or synopsis or a certain section of the story. If you're only sending a query, then it's a good idea to mention that you are willing to send the full manuscript or any portion that the agent or editor may wish to see. Having all the parts of a query letter is only the first step. We need to make sure that we make our query letters stand out. To do this, we can personalize the query letter. You'll want your query letter to fit your book, to fit your audience, and to fit your relationship with that audience. To make the query letter fit your story, keep in mind this is your first impression. It is your sales tool for your story, and it will often be the determining factor of whether this person ever sees any of your actual storytelling. You can make your query letter formal or use the same style and writer's voice you use for your story. There are a few ways we can personalize our query letter to fit our audience, the agent or editor we're sending it to. Often in an agent or editor's submission guidelines, they will mention the types of stories they are interested in or seeking. If that is the case, be sure to mention elements in your story that match the things this agent or editor is looking for. As I mentioned earlier, you can also list the titles of stories similar to yours that this agent or editor has represented or published. And again, make your query letter fit the relationship you have with that agent or editor. So if you have any kind of connection with that person, it's a good idea to point that out early on. This could make your query stand out from those written by authors who have no connection with this person. Keep in mind, publishing is a business, so agents and editors like to see that the author has done her research and cares about what that agent or editor is looking for. Your story won't be rejected just because you didn't personalize your query, but doing so can help you stand out from other authors. If you haven't done so already, be sure to sign up for my free workshop, The 6 Essential Elements of a Powerful Story, and be prepared to take notes, so you'll have something awesome to promote to those agents and editors in your query letter. Remember, just click the link in the description or go to b2writercoaching.com/workshop. For today's Power Up, even if you're not quite ready to write your query letter, but you know enough about your story to have a good idea of what it's about, practice writing a teaser paragraph about your story. It's never too early to start this. Some authors even write the synopsis or the teaser part of the query letter before they write the story. It may change and likely will change after you have the story completed, but it can be a good jumping off point and keep you on track while you're doing the writing. If you have any questions about how to write a query letter or anything related to the writing craft or the writer's life, be sure to comment below and hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you won't miss next week's writer coaching session. What if you aren't ready to submit your story for publication? Maybe you're struggling just to finish the story. If that's you, it's probably too early to start thinking about writing a query letter. Check out this video instead on how to keep writing when life gets in the way. And let's power up your storytelling.